The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Adeyemi mansion in Ikoyi like angry fists demanding entry. Folisade stood in the master bedroom, her 7-month pregnant belly pressing against the silk fabric of the anniversary dress she'd bought 3 weeks ago. The one she would never wear now. In her trembling hands, she held her husband's second phone. The one he thought she didn't know about. The messages were still open. Months of them. Years perhaps. My king, I'm tired of hiding. When will you leave her? The lingerie you bought me last night. I wore it thinking of you. She's pregnant again? Ola, you promised me. Sada's breath came in short gasps. The baby kicked hard against her ribs as if sensing her distress. She pressed a hand to her stomach, whispering, Ahmed and me, it's okay. Mommy is okay. But she wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. Thunder cracked across the Lagos sky, and the bedroom door burst open. Olamide Adeyemi stood there in his tailored Armani suit, still damp from the rain. At 38, he was the kind of man who commanded attention, tall, broad-shouldered, with the confidence of someone who'd built a construction empire from the ground up. But right now, seeing his wife holding that phone, his face drained of color. Saad. 5 years, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Today is our 5th anniversary, Olamide. 5 years of marriage. And how many years of lies? He stepped into the room, hands raised as if approaching a wounded animal. Baby, please. Let me explain. Explain. The word erupted from her like a volcano. Explain how you've been sleeping with that woman while I carried your children? Explain how you bought her gifts with money from our joint account? Explain which part, Olamide? Which part needs explanation? The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the marble floor. She gripped the edge of the dresser, suddenly dizzy. The room spun and she felt wetness on her cheeks. Tears she didn't remember starting to cry. Ola moved closer, reaching for her. Saad, please sit down. Think of the baby. Now you think of the baby? She laughed bitterly, backing away from him. You weren't thinking of your baby when you were in bed with Bisola Okoro, were you? You weren't thinking of our 3-year-old daughter sleeping in the next room. You weren't thinking of any of us. It wasn't like that. She means nothing. Don't. Sada's voice cracked. Don't you dare insult me further by saying she means nothing. I read the messages, Ola. My king. My love. The only man who truly sees me. That doesn't sound like nothing. Outside, lightning illuminated the room in harsh white light, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. The generator kicked in as power failed across the neighborhood, and in that moment of mechanical groaning, they heard it, the doorbell. Ola's eyes went wide. Don't answer that. But Saad was already moving, her pregnant body swaying as she walked. Something in his panic told her everything she needed to know. She made it to the top of the grand staircase just as their housemate, Morin Keiji, opened the front door. Bisola Okoro stood in the doorway like a vision from a nightmare. She was everything Saad was not, tall and willowy where Saad was petite and round with pregnancy, wearing a body-hugging red dress that clung to her like a second skin, makeup perfect despite the rain. Her skin gleamed like polished mahogany, and her Brazilian weave fell in perfect waves down her back. She looked up at Saad with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Hello, Sister Saad, Bisola said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. I hope I'm not interrupting your anniversary celebration. Saad gripped the banister, her knuckles white. Get out of my house. Your house. Bisola stepped inside, shaking water from her designer bag. Funny. Ola told me he was thinking of making this our house soon. Ola appeared behind Saad at the top of the stairs. Bizi, what are you doing here? I told you. You told me many things, darling. Bisola's eyes glittered dangerously. You told me you loved me. You told me you were leaving her. You told me the baby was a mistake. She looked at Sada's belly with unconcealed disgust. Another one to trap you with. The baby kicked hard and Saad gasped. Morin Keiji stood frozen by the door, her hand over her mouth. You need to leave, Ola said, starting down the stairs. Now, Bizi. This is not the time. When I asked the time, Olamide? Bisola's voice rose. When you filled this house with how many children? When we're both old and gray. I'm 32 years old. I've given you 3 years of my life. 3 years of expensive gifts and hotel rooms. Saad found herself saying. Her voice was cold now, detached. 3 years of lying and sneaking around. 3 years of being the other woman. How proud your mother must be. Bisola's face twisted with rage. She started up the stairs. You self-righteous witch. You think you're better than me because you signed a paper? You think marriage makes you special? Ola stays with you out of obligation, not love. That's enough. Ola roared, but both women ignored him. They faced each other now at the top of the stairs, the wife and the mistress, separated by 3 feet and an ocean of betrayal. He doesn't love you, Bisola hissed. He never did. You were just convenient. The right family, the right connections for his business. But me? I'm what he wants. I'm what he dreams about. Saad felt something break inside her chest. Not her heart, that had already shattered. This was something deeper, more fundamental. The last thread of hope that her marriage could be saved, that her family could remain intact. You want him. Saad heard herself say. Take him. Take this lying, cheating, sorry excuse for a man. But know this, Bisola Okoro. A man who cheats with you will cheat on you. And when he does, when he finds another woman younger and prettier, remember this moment. Remember that you destroyed a family for someone who doesn't know the meaning of loyalty. She turned to face her husband. Ola's face was a mask of anguish, but she felt nothing looking at him. Nothing but contempt. Saad, please. He reached for her. Don't touch me. She stepped back. Don't ever touch me again. But the baby. My baby, she corrected. This child is mine. You lost your right to. Your baby. Bisola laughed shrilly. He's not just going to let you take his child. He has rights. He has nothing. Saad screamed and the baby kicked again, harder this time. She felt a sharp pain in her lower abdomen. He has nothing because he threw everything away for a woman who spreads her legs for anyone with a fat wallet. Bisola lunged forward and everything happened at once. Ola jumped between them, trying to push Bisola back, but his hand caught Saada's shoulder instead. Off balance, pregnant, overwrought with emotion, Saad stumbled. Her foot missed the top step. She reached for the banister but found only air. Time slowed to a crawl. She saw Ola's face, horror dawning in his eyes. She saw Bisola's mouth forming a perfect O of shock. She felt gravity take hold of her heavy body. And then she was falling. The marble stairs were unforgiving. Her body hit once, twice, 3 times. Each impact driving the air from her lungs. Each collision a symphony of pain. She heard Morinkeji scream as if from far away. She heard Ola shouting her name. When she finally stopped at the bottom of the stairs, sprawled on the cold marble floor, Saad looked down at herself. Her dress, the beautiful anniversary dress she'd never worn, was riding up around her thighs. And spreading slowly across the pristine white marble beneath her was a dark red stain that seemed to grow wider with each passing second. The baby, she whispered. Please God, not my baby. But God wasn't listening. Or perhaps he was listening and had already made his decision about the price of betrayal. Ola was beside her, his hands hovering over her body, afraid to touch, afraid to hurt her more. Saad. Morinkeji, call an ambulance. Call an ambulance now. Saad looked up at her husband through a haze of pain. At the top of the stairs, backlit by lightning, Bisola stood watching the scene unfold. And in that moment, Saad saw something flicker across the other woman's face. Not remorse. Not horror. Satisfaction. The last thing Saad heard before the darkness took her was Ola's voice, broken and desperate, begging her to hold on. But she was already letting go of consciousness, of hope, and of the tiny life that had been growing inside her. The storm raged on outside, indifferent to the tragedy unfolding in the Adeyemi mansion. Some storms pass. Others change the landscape forever. This was the latter. The fluorescent lights of Lagos University Teaching Hospital burned into Olamide's retinas like accusatory fingers. He sat in the emergency waiting room, his expensive suit stained with his wife's blood. His hands still trembling 3 hours after the ambulance had screamed away from his house. Blood. So much blood. Mr. Adeyemi? A doctor approached, her face grave. She was young, probably in her early 30s, with kind eyes that had seen too much tragedy. I'm Dr. Aduk Williams. I need to speak with you about your wife. Ola shot to his feet, his legs barely supporting him. Is she? Please tell me she's. Your wife is alive, Dr. Williams said quickly, and Ola felt his knees buckle with relief. But I'm afraid the baby didn't make it. The trauma from the fall caused a placental abruption. By the time she arrived, there was no fetal heartbeat. We had to perform an emergency procedure too. The rest of her words faded into static. Ola heard himself making sounds, gasping, choking sounds that didn't seem human. His son. They'd known for 3 months it was a boy. Saad had wanted to name him Iamide. My joy has arrived. But joy hadn't arrived. Death had. I need to see her, he managed to say. Dr. Williams shook her head. She's in recovery now, and honestly, Mr. Adeyemi, I don't think that's wise. She's been asking for her sister, not for you. And given the circumstances. She paused, measuring her words carefully. The police will want to speak with both of you. There are questions about how exactly she fell. Cold dread washed over him. Questions? It was an accident. A terrible accident. Was it? Another voice cut through the waiting room. Ola turned to see his younger sister, Damilola, striding toward him in her nurse's scrubs. Her face was a mask of fury. Dami worked at this hospital, which meant she'd probably heard everything from her colleagues. Behind her came their father, Chief Adebayo Adeyemi, his traditional Agbada robes making him look like the king he was in their hometown. Dami! His sister's hand connected with his face in a slap that echoed through the waiting room. Several people looked up, but Dami didn't care. You pushed her. Morinkeji told me everything. She called me crying, said you and that prostitute were fighting with Saad at the top of the stairs, and then, her voice broke. And then my nephew died, Olamide. Your son is dead. I didn't push her. I was trying to stop Bizi from. But even as the words left his mouth, Ola knew how hollow they sounded. His hand had touched Sada's shoulder. In trying to push Bisola away, he'd made contact with his pregnant wife instead. The details were blurry, happening too fast, but the result was crystal clear. His son was dead. Chief Adebayo stood like a statue, his face carved from stone. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, which made it more terrifying than if he'd shouted. You brought that woman to your house? On your anniversary? With your pregnant wife there? Baba, I didn't invite her. She just showed up. And whose fault is that? His father's eyes blazed. Whose bed have you been warming while your wife carried your child? Whose money have you been spending on designer bags and trips to Dubai, while your own daughter's school fees waited to be paid? Ola stared at his father. How did you? You think I'm blind? You think the whole family doesn't know? Dami's voice was thick with disgust. Everybody knows about Bisola Okoro, Ola. The whole of Lagos Island knows. We were just waiting for you to come to your senses, but instead you. She couldn't finish. A commotion at the emergency entrance made them all turn. 2 police officers walked in, their presence commanding immediate attention. Behind them, impossibly, inexplicably, was Bisola. She'd changed clothes. The red dress replaced with a demure white ensemble that made her look innocent, virginal almost. Her makeup was understated, her eyes red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. She was playing a part, and Ola recognized it immediately. That's him, officers, Bisola said, pointing at Ola with a trembling finger. That's the man who pushed his wife down the stairs. The waiting room went silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. What? Ola's voice came out as a strangled whisper. Bizi, what are you doing? The taller police officer, a man with sergeant stripes and a weathered face, stepped forward. Mr. Olamide Adeyemi? I'm Sergeant Adekunle Balogun. We need you to come with us to answer some questions about the incident at your residence tonight. This is insane. Ola looked at Bisola, searching for the woman he'd held in his arms, the woman who'd whispered she loved him. But her eyes were cold, calculating. Bizi, tell them the truth. Tell them it was an accident. I'm telling them exactly what I saw, Bisola said, her voice small and frightened, a perfect victim's voice. I came to your house to end our relationship. I wanted to do the right thing, to tell your wife myself that we were done. But you got angry. You said if I left you, you'd destroy my reputation. And when your wife tried to defend me, tried to calm you down, you just pushed her. A single tear rolled down her cheek. I tried to stop you, but it happened so fast. You lying snake. Dami lunged at Bisola, but Chief Adebayo caught her arm. You came to their house to flaunt yourself. You've been sleeping with my brother for years. Don't you dare stand there and— Ma'am, please calm down, the second officer said. We'll get everyone's statement. Her statement is a lie. Ola roared. She's the one who came to cause trouble. She's the one who attacked my wife. I was trying to protect Saad. By pushing her down the stairs? Sergeant Balagan's voice was neutral, but his eyes were sharp. Sir, we have a witness who says otherwise. We have your housemaid's statement that there was a physical altercation between you, your wife, and this woman. And we have a dead baby. He paused. Now, you can come with us voluntarily to give your statement, or we can make this official. The world tilted. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Olamide didn't push her. Mornkeji's voice rang out. The housemaid had appeared from somewhere in the hospital, her eyes swollen from crying. I was there. I saw everything. That woman, she pointed at Bisola. She was the one causing trouble. Oga was trying to protect Madam. Then why did Madam fall? Bisola asked softly. If he was protecting her, why is she in the hospital? Why is her baby dead? The question hung in the air like a noose. Because Ola didn't have an answer. In trying to push Bisola away, in the chaos and the screaming and the rain pounding outside, his hand had caught Sada's shoulder. He'd made her lose her balance. Whether he meant to or not, whether it was intentional or accidental, the result was the same. He had caused his wife to fall. He had killed his son. I need to see her, Ola said desperately. I need to explain to Saad. Mrs. Adeyemi doesn't want to see you, Dr. Williams interjected. She's been very clear about that. In fact, she's asked that you be kept away from her room. Something inside Ola's chest cracked. But she's my wife. A wife you betrayed, his father said coldly. A wife you humiliated. A wife whose baby is now dead because of your actions. Chief Adebayo straightened his agbada, his movements deliberate. You are no longer my son. From this moment you are dead to this family. When you go to the ancestral shrine, do not speak to your mother's spirit. You are unworthy. In Yoruba culture, to be disowned by your father was worse than death. It meant being cut off from your lineage, your ancestors, your very identity. Ola felt the weight of those words like a physical blow. Baba, please. Come with us, Mr. Adeyemi, Sergeant Balagan said, not unkindly. Let's go downtown and sort this out. As the police led him toward the exit, Ola looked back one last time. Bisola stood there, her face a mask of false concern, and in her eyes, he finally saw what he'd been too blind to see before, triumph. She'd won. She'd destroyed his marriage, his family, his life. And she'd done it while making him the villain of the story. At the doorway, he passed another woman being wheeled in on a gurney, bleeding from a motorcycle accident. Life and death arriving and departing, all in the same space. The hospital was a threshold between worlds, and Ola realized with sickening clarity that he'd crossed a threshold tonight too. There was before when he was a husband, a father, a son. And there was after when he was the man who killed his own child. Outside, the rain had stopped. The storm had passed, leaving Lagos washed clean and gleaming under the sodium streetlights. But some stains don't wash away. Some consequences are permanent. As the police car pulled away from the hospital, Ola looked back at the building where his wife lay recovering from injuries he'd caused, where his son's small body lay cold in the morgue. He thought about the moment his hand had touched Sada's shoulder. That split second that had changed everything. In that moment he'd made a choice. Not consciously perhaps, but a choice nonetheless. In the chaos between his mistress and his wife, he'd reacted. And in reacting, he'd revealed what was in his heart. He'd chosen wrong. The police station loomed ahead, its lights harsh and unforgiving. But Ola knew that whatever punishment the law had for him would be nothing compared to the punishment he'd inflict on himself every day for the rest of his life. Some mistakes can be forgiven. Some can be forgotten. But some mistakes etch themselves into your soul like scars, permanent reminders of the moment you became someone you never thought you'd be. As they processed him into the system, fingerprints, photographs, preliminary statements, Ola's phone buzzed in the plastic bag containing his personal effects. Through the clear plastic he could see the notification. A message from Bisola. Sorry baby, but you weren't going to leave her, and I'm tired of being second. At least now you're free. Call me when this blows over. Love you. She'd signed it with a heart emoji. Ola stared at those words until they blurred, until the phone screen went dark, until the police officer asked if he was ready to give his statement. But how could he explain? How could he make them understand that he hadn't meant to push Saad, that it was an accident, a terrible accident? And even if they believed him, even if they determined it was manslaughter instead of murder, how could he ever make it right? The answer was simple. He couldn't. Some things once broken can never be repaired. Some lives once lost can never be restored. Some moments once past echo in eternity. This was his moment, his echo, and it would haunt him forever. 48 hours later, Olamide Adeyemi walked out of the police station into the harsh afternoon sun of Lagos. The charges had been reduced to involuntary manslaughter pending further investigation, and his lawyer, the best money could buy, had secured his release on bail. But freedom felt like a cruel joke. His phone had been returned to him, and it wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls from business associates, messages from friends, notifications from news sites. His face was everywhere on blogs, newspapers, trending on Twitter. The headlines competed for the most damning narrative. Construction mogul arrested in wife's fall. Pregnant woman loses baby after staircase incident. Love triangle turns deadly in Ikoyi mansion. But the worst one, the one that made bile rise in his throat, was from a gossip blog. Ola Adeyemi, the man who chose his side chick over his unborn son. Because that's what everyone believed now. That's what it looked like. And wasn't it the truth? His driver Akintund waited by the car, his face carefully neutral. But Ola could see the judgment in the older man's eyes. Akintund had driven for the Adeyemi family for 15 years. He'd driven Ola to his wedding. He'd driven Saad to her prenatal appointments. Where to, sir? Akintund's voice was stiff, formal. Home, Ola said, then realized the word had lost all meaning. The house. Take me to the house. The drive through Lagos traffic was silent except for the radio, which Akintund quickly switched off when the news began discussing the Adeyemi case. Every red light felt like an eternity. Pedestrians walked past, some glancing at the Mercedes with its tinted windows, none of them knowing that inside sat a man whose entire world had collapsed. When they pulled up to the mansion, Ola noticed immediately that something was different. The gate was closed, which was unusual during the day. As Akintund pulled up, the security guard Emeka, who'd worked there for 3 years, approached the car window. Sir, Emeka said, not meeting Ola's eyes, I have instructions not to let you in. What? This is my house. Yes, sir. But Madam's lawyer came this morning with papers. He said to tell you that you're not allowed on the property until the legal matters are settled. Emeka looked miserable delivering this message. I'm sorry, sir. It's not my choice. Ola felt the walls closing in. Where's my daughter? Where's Ayomi? She's with your sister, sir. Madami came and took her yesterday. His daughter. His 3-year-old Ayomi. My joy has increased. Except now all joy had been subtracted from his life, divided by his mistakes, multiplied into infinite regret. Sir, I need to move the car, Akintund said quietly. We're blocking the road. Ola stared at the gate of his own home, the mansion he'd built with his own hands, the symbol of everything he'd achieved. And now he couldn't enter. He'd been locked out of his own life. Take me to the office, he said finally. But the office proved no refuge either. His secretary, Falyuk, looked shocked when he walked in. Sir, we didn't expect you. Why wouldn't you expect me? This is my company. Falyuk exchanged glances with someone behind him. Ola turned to find Chukwemeka Okonkwo, his business partner and CFO, standing there with a folder in his hands. Ola, Chukwemeka said carefully, we need to talk. They went into Ola's office, or what used to be his office. Chukwemeka closed the door and handed him the folder. The board met this morning, Chukwemeka began. Given the negative publicity and the pending legal issues, they voted to place you on indefinite leave. I'll be acting CEO until. You're taking my company? Ola couldn't believe what he was hearing. Chukwu, we built this together. We started with one cement mixer and a dream. And now we have 300 employees whose livelihoods depend on this company's reputation, Chukwuemeka said firmly. Ola, I love you like a brother, but this is bigger than you now. We've already lost 2 major contracts. The state government project we were bidding on? They withdrew our proposal. Said they don't want to be associated with domestic controversy. He paused. It's only temporary. Once you clear your name. If I clear my name. Ola sank into his chair. You think I did it, don't you? You think I pushed her? Chukwuemeka was quiet for a long moment. I think you made a series of bad choices that led to a tragedy. Whether you physically pushed her or not. That's for the courts to decide. But Ola. He leaned forward. I warned you about Bisola. Remember? 2 years ago when I first found out, I told you she was trouble. I told you she was using you. But you didn't listen. She said she loved me. Ola whispered, and even to his own ears it sounded pathetic. She loved your money. Your status. Your ability to take her to places she couldn't afford on her own. Chukwuemeka stood. I'm sorry it came to this, brother. I truly am. But you need to leave the office. Security will pack your personal items and send them to... Where should they send them? Ola realized he didn't have an answer. He had nowhere to go. His house was locked, his family had disowned him, and now his company, the empire he'd built, was being taken away. A hotel, he said finally. Send them to the Eco Hotel. I'll get a room. After Chukwuemeka left, Ola sat alone in his office for what he knew would be the last time. He looked at the framed photos on his desk. His wedding day, Iomaposi's first birthday, Sada's face glowing as she showed him the positive pregnancy test for their son. Their son who was now dead. His phone rang. An unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. Hello. Is this Olamide Adeyemi? A woman's voice, crisp and professional. Yes. This is Folashade Adeyemi's attorney, Adiz Nwosu. My client has instructed me to inform you that she will be filing for divorce. You'll be served with papers within the week. Additionally, she's seeking a restraining order preventing you from contacting her or approaching within 200 meters of any location where she might be present. The words hit him like bullets. She won't even talk to me? Won't let me explain. Mr. Adeyemi, your explanation resulted in the death of her child. What more is there to say? Adiz's voice was ice. Furthermore, my client will be seeking full custody of your daughter, Iomaposi, along with the family home, 70% of your joint assets, and monthly support payments of. She can have it all. Ola shouted. I don't care about the money. I just want to see my wife to tell her. Your wife doesn't want to hear anything you have to say. The best thing you can do now is comply with her wishes and stay away. Do you understand? No, I don't understand. It was an accident. I didn't mean. The line went dead. Ola tried to call back, but the number was blocked. He tried Sada's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. He tried Dami's number, blocked. His father's phone blocked. Even Morinkeji's phone had been disconnected. He was completely, utterly alone. The sun was setting by the time he left the office building, casting Lagos in shades of orange and purple. He checked into the Eco Hotel using a credit card he hoped still worked. The room was luxurious, ocean views, king-sized bed, all the amenities, but it felt like a prison cell. He tried calling Bisola. For 2 days she'd been unreachable, but surely now she would answer. Surely she would explain to the police that she'd lied, that she'd been angry and scared. The phone rang. And rang. Finally someone picked up. Busy, thank God. Who is this? A man's voice, deep and unfamiliar. Ola pulled the phone away to check the number. It was definitely Bisola's. This is Olamide. Who are you? Why do you have Bisola's phone? The man laughed. Oh, you're the construction guy. Busy told me about you. Look man, she's done with that situation. She's moved on. You should too. Moved on? What do you? She's with me now, understand? And she said if you call again, she'll tell the police you're harassing her. The man's voice hardened. Stay away from my woman. The call ended. Ola stood frozen in his hotel room, the phone still pressed to his ear. Bisola had moved on. Just like that. 2 days after his son died, 3 days after his life fell apart, she'd already found someone new. He stumbled to the bathroom and vomited. When there was nothing left in his stomach, he dry-heaved until his ribs ached. Finally, he collapsed on the bathroom floor, the cool tiles against his cheek. He'd lost everything. His wife, his son, his daughter, his family, his company, his reputation. And for what? For a woman who discarded him the moment he was no longer useful. For cheap thrills and empty promises. For an illusion he'd mistaken for love. The real tragedy wasn't just the fall. It wasn't just his son's death, though that was unspeakable. The real tragedy was that he'd sacrificed everything that mattered for something that never existed in the first place. Bisola had never loved him. She'd loved what he could do for her. And the moment he couldn't provide that anymore, she'd vanished like smoke. A knock on the hotel room door startled him. For a wild moment, he hoped it was Saad, that she'd come to hear his side of the story. He dragged himself up and opened the door. A hotel staff member stood there with a package. "Delivery for Mr. Adeyemi, sir." Ola took the package and closed the door. Inside was a USB drive with a note. "Thought you should see this. Chukwamika." He plugged the USB into his laptop. There was a single video file labeled "Bizian." The video was security footage from Ola's own company, dated 6 months ago. It showed Bisola in the accounting office late at night, long after everyone else had gone home. She was at the computer transferring money. His money. Ola watched in horror as the video showed transaction after transaction. 50,000 naira here, 100,000 there. Over the course of several visits, she'd stolen almost 2 million naira from the company accounts. But there was more. Another video file showed Bisola meeting with ZEENAH'S, one of Ola's biggest competitors, at a restaurant. They were laughing, drinking wine, and in one damning moment, Bisola handed Sigan a folder. Even without audio, Ola knew what that folder contained. His company's bids. His strategies. Trade secrets. She'd been betraying him all along. While whispering sweet nothings in his ear. While playing the devoted mistress, she'd been systematically destroying everything he'd built. The final video was timestamped from 3 weeks ago. Bisola was in her apartment on the phone, her face animated. The video had subtitles. Someone had hired a lip reader. "Yes, I know he's married. No, I don't care about him. Look, he's my golden goose, okay? Once I've bled him dry, I'm done. His wife. She's a fool. She'll never leave him. But if she does, even better. Divorce means liquid assets, and I'll make sure I get my cut somehow." Ola watched the videos 3 times, each viewing twisting the knife deeper into his chest. He'd been played. Completely, thoroughly played. And in falling for Bisola's act, he destroyed the one person who'd truly loved him. Saad. His Saad, who'd stood by him when he had nothing. Who'd believed in his dreams when no one else did. Who'd given him a daughter and was ready to give him a son. She'd loved him unconditionally, and he'd thrown that love away for a con artist. As night fell over Lagos, Olamide Adeyemi sat in his hotel room and finally let himself cry. Not pretty tears but ugly gut-wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. He cried for his son who would never take a first breath. He cried for his daughter who would grow up without a father. He cried for his wife whose love he'd shattered beyond repair. But most of all, he cried for himself, for the man he used to be, the man who'd had everything and thrown it all away. Tomorrow he would have to face the consequences of his actions. Tomorrow the lawyers and the courts and the public opinion would exact their pound of flesh. But tonight, alone in a hotel room that cost more than most Nigerians made in a month, Olamide Adeyemi learned the hardest lesson of his life. Some prices are too high to pay. Some mistakes cost more than money. And some regrets last forever. Outside his window, Lagos sparkled with a million lights, each one representing a life, a story, a soul. Somewhere in that sprawling city, his wife lay healing from wounds he'd caused. His daughter slept, confused about where her daddy had gone. His son's body waited for burial. And Bisola? She was probably in some other man's arms, already spinning new lies, already plotting her next move. The city didn't care about Ola's pain. Lagos never stopped, never slowed, never mourned. Tomorrow would come whether he was ready or not. And Olamide Adeyemi would have to face it. alone, disgraced, and haunted by the ghost of the man he used to be. 3 weeks after the fall, Falisaid Adeyemi opened her eyes to a world she no longer recognized. The private hospital room was filled with flowers, from her boutique staff, from friends, from family, but they all looked like funeral arrangements to her. 'Cause that's what this was, wasn't it? A funeral. For her son. For her marriage. For the woman she used to be. You're awake. Damilola sat in the chair beside her bed, looking exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually immaculate hair was pulled back in a messy bun. Thank God. You've been drifting in and out for days. Sada's hand moved automatically to her stomach. Flat. Empty. The absence of her baby's movements was a silence that screamed louder than any sound. I am I, she whispered. That was all she could manage before the tears came again. Dami was beside her instantly, holding her as she sobbed. I know, honey. I know. I'm so sorry. When the tears finally subsided, though they never really stopped, just paused, Saad asked the question she'd been dreading. Where is he? The baby. Where is my son? At the morgue. We've been waiting for you to wake up properly before making arrangements. Dami squeezed her hand. Your parents flew in from Ibadan. They're at a hotel nearby. Do you want me to call them? Saad nodded, then asked the question that had been burning in her chest. And Olamide? Dami's face hardened. That bastard is where he deserves to be. Alone and suffering. He's been calling everyone, sending messages, begging for a chance to explain. Father disowned him. The company removed him. His face is all over the news. She paused. Saad, there's something you should know. About Bisola. Over the next hour, Dami showed her everything. The videos Chukwemeka had found. The evidence of theft and betrayal. The proof that Bisola had been using Ola from the beginning. She even showed her news articles about how Bisola had been spotted with Colonel Adewale, a wealthy oil magnate, just days after the incident. Saad watched it all with a strange detachment. She should feel vindicated. She should feel satisfied that the woman who destroyed her family had been exposed as a fraud. But she felt nothing. Numbness had replaced all other emotions. She lied to the police too, Dami continued. Morin Keji gave a full statement, and the security footage from your street cameras shows Bisola arriving at your house uninvited. The police have dropped the investigation into Ola. They've determined it was an accident. She waited for Sada's reaction. He's not going to jail. Good, Saad said flatly. Dami looked shocked. Good? Saad, he's the reason. He's the reason our son is dead, yes. But jail won't bring Ayamite back. Nothing will. Sada's voice was hollow, scraped clean of emotion. I want him to live, Dami. I want him to wake up every day and remember what he did. I want him to grow old knowing he killed his own child for a woman who never loved him. Death or prison would be too easy. I want him to suffer the way I'm suffering. The venom in her own voice scared her, but she didn't take the words back. The divorce papers are ready, Dami said quietly. Your lawyer just needs you to sign them when you're ready. I'll sign them today. I want him out of my life completely. And Ayomi Posi? At the mention of her daughter, Sada's composure cracked. How is she? Does she understand? She knows something is wrong. She keeps asking when Daddy is coming home. When you're coming home. Dami's voice was gentle. I've been staying with her at your parents' hotel. She misses you desperately. Bring her to me. Tomorrow. I need to see my baby. Saad closed her eyes. As for Olamide's visitation rights, tell the lawyer I'll allow supervised visits only. He's still her father, even if he's a terrible husband. I won't take that from her. But even as she said it, Saad felt the bitterness in her mouth. Olamide had taken so much from her. Her trust. Her marriage. Her son. And yet, she was supposed to be gracious, to think of their daughter's needs above her own pain. Life was cruel in its expectations. 2 days later, Saad was finally discharged from the hospital. Her parents took her to their home in Ibadan, away from Lagos and its memories. Away from the mansion where her son had died. Away from the life she'd built and lost. Ayomiposi ran to her the moment she arrived, small arms wrapping around Sada's legs. Mommy! Mommy's home. Saad picked up her daughter despite the pain in her still healing body and held her tight, breathing in the scent of shea butter and innocence. Yes, baby. Mommy's home. Where's the baby? Where's my brother? Ayomiposi's 3-year-old face was so earnest, so full of hope. This was the moment Saad had been dreading. How do you explain death to a child? How do you tell your daughter that the brother she'd been excited to meet was gone forever? The baby had to go back to heaven, Ahmed and me, Saad said softly. God needed him more than we did. But I wanted to play with him. Ayomiposi's bottom lip trembled. Can we get another baby? Saad felt something break inside her chest. Maybe someday, sweetheart. But not now. And Daddy? Can Daddy come home now? No, baby. Daddy has to stay away for a while. But I miss Daddy. I know you do. Saad set her daughter down, her arms too weak to hold her any longer. But sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and when they do, things change. Daddy made a big mistake, and now Mommy and Daddy can't live together anymore. She watched her daughter process this, watched innocence begin its slow erosion. This was another thing Olamide had stolen from them. Ayomiposi's carefree childhood. From now on, she would be the girl whose father killed her brother, whose parents divorced in scandal. The whispers would follow her to school, to birthday parties, through her entire life. That night, after Ayomiposi had cried herself to sleep, Saad sat in her childhood bedroom in her parents' house and finally allowed herself to think about the future. She was 28 years old. She'd lost a child and was divorcing her husband. Her boutique had been running on autopilot for weeks, probably losing customers and revenue. Her life was in shambles. But she was alive. Her son was dead, but she was alive. And that meant she had a choice. She could let this tragedy define her, could spend the rest of her life as a victim of Olamide's betrayal and Bisola's manipulation. Or she could rebuild. The thought terrified her more than anything else. Because rebuilding meant accepting that this was real, that her marriage was over, that her son was gone. Rebuilding meant moving forward when all she wanted to do was crawl into bed and never come out. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Her mother, Ayabo, entered carrying a tray of food. You need to eat, Falisade. I'm not hungry, Mama. I didn't ask if you were hungry. Ayabo set the tray down firmly. You need strength. For yourself and for Ayomiposi. Saad looked at the food, jollof rice, plantains, her favorite chicken stew, and felt her stomach turn. But her mother was right. She couldn't waste away. As she forced herself to eat, her mother sat beside her. I want to tell you something, Omo Binranmi. Something I've never told you before. Saad looked up, surprised by the serious tone. When I was pregnant with you, I had a miscarriage first. A little boy. I was 6 months along. Ayabo's voice was steady, but her eyes glistened. Your father and I thought we would never recover. The pain was unbearable. But then a year later you came. And you taught me that life goes on, even when we think it can't. Mama, I'm not telling you this to minimize your pain, Ayabo continued. Your pain is real and valid. You have every right to grieve. But I'm telling you this so you know that you will survive this. You will carry this loss with you forever. But it won't destroy you unless you let it. Saad felt tears streaming down her face again. How do I forgive him, Mama? How do I forgive Olamide for what he did? Who said anything about forgiveness? Her mother's eyes flashed. That man betrayed you, humiliated you, and his actions killed your child. You don't have to forgive him. You just have to stop letting him have power over your life. She wiped Saada's tears with her thumb. Sign the divorce papers. Take your settlement. Rebuild your life. And if Olamide wants to wallow in his regret for the rest of his days, let him. That's his burden to carry, not yours. It was the permission Saad hadn't known she needed. Permission to be angry. Permission to not forgive. Permission to move on without closure or reconciliation. I'll sign the papers tomorrow, Saad said. And she did. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Olamide didn't contest anything. Saad got the house, 70% of their assets, full custody of Ayomiposi with supervised visitation for Olamide, and monthly support payments that would ensure she never had to worry about money again. The funeral for baby Ayamide was small and private, just family. Olamide was allowed to attend, standing far from Saad, his face a mask of devastation. He tried to approach her once, but Dami stepped between them like a guard dog. Saad didn't look at him, couldn't look at him, because if she looked at him, if she saw the pain in his eyes, she might start to feel something. And she couldn't afford to feel anything for Olamide Adeyemi anymore. That well had run dry. As they lowered the tiny casket into the ground at Ikoyi Cemetery, Saad made a silent promise to her son. I will be strong, Ayamide. I will live the life you never got to live. I will love your sister enough for both of you. And I will never ever let another man have the power to destroy me. 6 weeks after the fall, Falisaid Adeyemi returned to her boutique in Victoria Island. Her staff greeted her with tears and hugs, and customers who'd heard about her tragedy sent flowers and messages of support. The boutique had survived in her absence, but barely. Saad threw herself into work with a ferocity that surprised everyone, including herself. She redesigned the store, launched a new collection, started an online platform. Every hour she worked was an hour she didn't spend thinking about her dead son or her failed marriage. And slowly, painfully, she began to heal. Not completely, not perfectly. The grief never went away. It just became part of her, like a scar that ached in the rain. But she learned to live with it. She learned to smile again, to laugh with Ayomiposi, to find joy in small moments. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Saad received an email. The sender was anonymous, but the message was clear. I know what Bisola did to you. I know what she took from you. I thought you should know she's in police custody. Fraud charges. She stole from the wrong man this time. Colonel Adewale had her arrested. She's looking at 5 years minimum. Attached were news articles confirming the story. Bisola Okoro, the woman who destroyed Sada's family, was finally facing consequences for her actions. Saad read the articles twice, then deleted the email. Bisola's downfall should have brought satisfaction, but it didn't. It didn't bring her son back. It didn't erase the pain. It was just empty. That night, as she put Ayomiposi to bed, her daughter asked the question she'd been asking for months. Mommy, can I see Daddy? Saad had been allowing supervised visits, but they were brief and uncomfortable. Olamide looked like a ghost every time, hollow-eyed and thin. But he was gentle with Ayomiposi, patient and loving in a way that made Sada's heart ache. Yes, baby. We'll arrange a visit next week. Will you ever love Daddy again? The question hit Saad like a physical blow. She thought about lying, about giving her daughter false hope. But Ayomiposi deserved the truth. No, sweetheart. Mommy won't love Daddy again. But that's okay. Sometimes people's love ends, but it doesn't mean they never loved each other. And it doesn't change how much Daddy loves you. Ayomiposi considered this with the seriousness only a child can muster. Okay, Mommy. As long as I can still love Daddy. You can always love Daddy. Always. After Ayomiposi fell asleep, Saad stood at the window of her bedroom, the same bedroom where she discovered Olamide's betrayal, though she'd redecorated completely, and looked out at Lagos. The city sparkled in the darkness, indifferent to human suffering. She thought about Olamide, alone somewhere in that vast city, living with his choices. She thought about Bisola, sitting in a jail cell, her beauty and charm useless behind bars. She thought about her son who would never see this view, never grow up, never experience life. And she thought about herself, Falisaid Adeyemi, survivor. Wounded but not broken. Changed but not destroyed. The reckoning had come for all of them. Olamide had lost everything. Bisola had lost her freedom. And Saad had lost her innocence, her trust, her son. But she'd gained something too. Strength. Independence. The knowledge that she could survive anything. The past couldn't be changed. The mistakes couldn't be undone. The dead couldn't be brought back to life. But the future? The future was hers to shape. And that would have to be enough.